Okay, I appear to be recording, and welcome everybody to the March meeting of the Poetry Society of South Carolina. I have a little prepared thing I have to read. The Poetry Society is supported by South Carolina Humanities, a not-for-profit organization inspiring, engaging, and enriching South Carolinians with programs on literature, history, culture, and heritage. They have given us a very generous grant for this, our 100th year, and we are celebrating that all season long. So I'll give you a couple of little tidbits of information on history. It was 100 years ago this month, 100 years and 8 days ago, that Harriet Monroe spoke to the Poetry Society. She was the second. I am going to share my screen with you. I believe I will share the screen. All right. If all went well, you should be looking at a picture of Harriet Monroe right now. She was the second speaker to the Poetry Society after Carl Sandburg spoke in February. She was 60 years old at the time. I don't know if this picture, I don't know how old she was in this picture, but I'm imagining maybe around that age. She was the founder, owner, and the editor and chief bottle washer of Poetry magazine, which she founded in 1912. She used money from a lawsuit. She sued a New York newspaper to pay for the magazine. They published a poem of hers without asking permission, and she won. Pretty big settlement. And she was very good to the early Poetry Society. Let me show you a couple of pictures, I think. This is a picture of Poetry magazine. Her again with Poetry magazine. But what's really interesting is she was very impressed with what was going on in Charleston, and she gave over the so-called Southern number, which was April 1922, to the Poetry Society to edit and to determine the content. And so DuBose Hayward, Hervey Allen, and Beatrice Woody Ravenel collaborated, and and all the poets who appeared in that issue were from Charleston or from South Carolina. And she died at the age of 75, getting ready to climb Machu Picchu in Peru. So she died in Peru. And I have a quote from her. I just want to read because I think it's nice to remember someone who feels this way. Here's what she said: "I cannot remember when to die without leaving some memorable record did not seem to me a calamity too hard to be borne." So I am glad to be remembering her tonight on this 100th anniversary of her reading. And I want to stop my screen share at this point. Okay, you should be seeing me again, I guess, if all went well. I've got a couple of announcements to make. Oh, more recent history. I can't forget this. So a year ago this month, we had to cancel our very first meeting due to COVID. And that poet on that night was Val Nieman, who was the first poet we had to cancel for COVID-19. And so we're having her tonight, which is gets to come back a year later. And along those lines, we have decided that we will not be, we were keeping the window open thinking, well, maybe COVID will be gone enough, we can have meetings in person. We are not going to even try. So April and May, officially, no, they will be Zoom meetings. But with the way everything's looking, I am very hopeful for starting next season in September in person. And of course, we'll continue doing Zoom at the same time. So we'll have both going. So we will emerge from this a little better than we came into it by making it possible for people to join us, even if they don't live here or they don't want to go out. And so they will be able to enjoy our meetings by Zoom and in person if they so desire. And I hope, if all goes well, that will start in September, and we will have a seemingly regular season next year. one more thing, and then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm not going to say anything else. I sent out a survey in the March newsletter to help the Poetry Society in our quest to be a better poetry society in our next 100 years. So if you could fill out that survey, I want to beg and cajole and guilt and entreat and do anything I can to get you to fill out that survey. You can go to your March newsletter and find it and click on the survey, 10 questions. It won't take you very long. Or you can go to our website, poetrysocietysc.org, and find the newsletter and click the big purple button and take the survey. And I'd appreciate that. I'll tell you this because I want you to know how desperately we need people to fill out that survey. Only 35 people have participated so far, and I would have expected at least 100. So please help us out with that. We also have surveys for tonight's reading and tomorrow's workshop. Those have to be filled out. Those are part of our requirement for the generous grant we get from SC Humanities. So please do that. Those will appear later in the chat. So you'll be able to do that, and we appreciate it. And that's all I'm going to say. And I want to turn things over to Gary Jackson, who's a professor at the College of Charleston, and he is going to introduce our warm-up poet. Gary?
Hey, thanks, Jim. Hey, everybody. I see some familiar faces. Hey, John, Richard. I saw Derek like a second ago, but I think he muted his video. Anyway, it's my pleasure to be here tonight to introduce our opening poet. And I'm just going to get right to it. I should have double checked with Isabel too, because I feel like she's done more things than the last kind of bio I found, but we'll see. So it's my pleasure to introduce Isabel Prioleau as tonight's opening poet. Isabel interns, this is the part I should have double checked with her, but she interns at the Adroit Journal, and I think she still does. She was an attendee of the 2018 Juniper Institute for Young Writers and the 2019 Iowa Young Writers Studio. And I believe she is also still a member of the Adroit Journal Summer Mentorship Program's 2020 cohort. I first met Isabel actually when she enrolled in my Poetry 1 course a few years back. And I still remember the first poem she workshopped. I don't know if I've ever told her this, but that first poem really struck me because it was a lyric poem and it featured a central speaker navigating our then current landscape that was embedded with excerpts from Christine Blasey Ford's testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I was struck by the level of exceptional potential and talent she demonstrated in her very first poem of the semester. And it was a poem that resisted easy sentiment or a simple retelling of narrative events, either of which would be perfectly fine for a student taking an introduction to poetry class. But it was clear to me that she was already familiar with many of the most basic and advanced elements of poetic craft, including line, tension, voice, poetic movement, form. The list goes on. And then, of course, imagine my surprise when I later discovered that she was taking college courses while she was still in high school. So fast forward to spring 2021, where now she's currently enrolled in the MFA poetry workshop that I'm also teaching. And she's on the cusp of receiving, I'm sure, dozens of acceptance letters from colleges across the country. And she is still writing poems that surprise, delight, and interrogate our shared humanity through a series of sonnets currently that are guided by Parataxis Caesareas and a confident hand attempting to make sense of our senseless times. It is one of those rare feats that I think only poetry can achieve. And she always types still in Garamond, her favorite font, which this very introduction is also in Garamond in her honor, of course. Here's an excerpt from one of her poems. Haunting, the form would have waved, but a garden wall trellised, and nobody builds walls better than me, obscured you. Now, at 2:11 p.m., the west side of the building, The kettle starts whistling like writing the word. Every week, I'm equal parts excited, heartened, and humbled to witness the alchemy of Isabel's poems and that intimate voice that reaches out towards you, dear reader, full of the lyric intensity of a mature and sophisticated soul. But I've said enough. And if this is your first time being invited into the world of her poems, lucky you. Please help me give Isabel a hand.
Thank you so much. That just means so much. And I love that story about like the first workshop. I'm just, as always, so grateful to you for like guiding me along this poetic journey. Thank you. And tonight I will be reading a few sections from that current sonnet sequence I'm working on. It's titled Aliased Elegies, and it's a series of 15-line sonnets. So without further ado. Circuit breakers switch and I forget the meaning of wake up, brush my hair. Their fates are tied together, Miss Kadrowski said of Miss Ernst, and as a faint dust coats the mantelpiece, the moon, the dashboard as Spencer walks from the car, dressed in brown flannel, not looking back. Our fall collection has arrived. Our fall collection is slipping through our empty-handed hands, through the void of history, our elbows bumped against each other in the restaurant booth. I slept terribly. Thank you for asking. News circulates. Frau Mitschirm, 1964. Who shall we name the leader of has arrived. Red vinyl, brown cloth, Spencerian voltage. If we can call us, news circulates. It's 2020. Totalitarianisms, dust bunnies emerge from the gap between stove and wall and. Sorry, having one technical difficulty. Sorry. All right, there we go. And awesome, that should work now. Sorry about that. Toronto in late spring, poplar seeds circle the air, faces blur on the sidewalk, everything dissolving. Next year, the van, trees bend to the lake, reflection meets object. The mirror will crash into the crowd and the body, the wall and the wall, protective distance of the future tense. In another spring, I will turn off the news and listen to you. A flashlight will shine into the collapsed. I will never find the city humming as you strike single notes, but today it is late spring in Toronto, a slow unraveling. I drink coffee, play through each variation of a looping day, the happy sun, the raw water of Lake Ontario rising as I wade, a boat's weight crashing onto the shore as I catch seeds like bits of cotton and listen to their long decay. I thought I saw you aliased across these strangers' faces, on the sidewalk, in the park we ate lunch in the supermarket, cross signals, a familiar nose, a green coat. It's not for lack of you, but for the fact of your abundance, for who knows what number of forms you might haunt. Heard you in Glenn's humming, bare wall in the mirror, indistinct voices, over the waves of the phone, the beeping of checkout machines was subtext to your voice. In another winter, I would wake up, brush my hair. A chair and a wall, and that's all you need. That reminds me, in the western streets, the dead leaves are carried across the rally stage. The man unspeaks, walks backwards, descends the staircase. I contemplate some clouds, the grocery store parking lot, the January sky, a woman in a blue down vest. What is the difference between pasting and unbreaking, erasing and unwriting, An ambiguous smile, a friend of a friend named Mona, the effects of time on paint, the footage on rewind. In the wind, the trees brush the windows, warm voices, the January sky, a child in a blue, as I pose this question to you. The messages resume. 4 tips to build and keep your language has been stolen, replaced with a gaping space on the wall of the Museum Hofja van Mevrouw van Erden, the wrong words. We apologize for the delay. Emil, who had been the doctor present at the execution, was haunted by, when I stood in the most famous room in the palace, reflections were everywhere reflecting 1:44 a.m. On Hulu, I watch footage of all the windows imploding, Chip and Joanna flip homes, like light refracted by the atmosphere. I am asking that, no answer. The condemned man saying, "See you later, Doc," but the sonnets are still on their way. Here in the theater of public longing, Bridget Pegeen Kelly. All morning I lie, tracing the movement of the sun. A man who looks like, and who doesn't, places a model sailboat on the surface of the lake. Blur of a woman in a green dress rollerblades, redefining the muse as the performer, her artwork our longing, the time where night and day occupy the same sky, trying not to wake you. Joy to buy bread and eat it, to depict and to wake as if in flight, in defiance of speed limits, with the words, then I lean on the passenger window of the old wagon, looking up, the silhouettes of branches like cracks in the bowl of the sky that we long for and who. Until the signals are distinguishable, the words uncharged, I rewind the film, the blood lifting off from the statue, bodies descending the staircase, the glass returning to the windows, 2:11 to 2:10 p.m., the vehicle reversing, the map drained of pigment, the escalator moving upwards, our elbows touching, the bricks disassembling, the wind returning, my hair to my shoulders, the sonnets unwriting themselves, the leaves ascending to the trees, March turning to February, the reverse of the year, unwaking to. Like a morning glory to the sun, totalitarianism begins in contempt for what you have. The silent mornings break into uproarious sirens, proof of others running into death, just like soldiers run into bullets. It's a beautiful thing how we call disasters scenes, apologies, the sonnet can't contain, intertextuality of violence, and our own minds, deleted messages, an old friend's name, weapons grade data sold wholesale, deal by deal. It's a beautiful day. Here in the political theater, the perennial scene begins with arms outstretching towards, oh, you know, anything. Once, in a photograph outside house number 386, I was the sun in my family's eyes, a future tense refracted through the snow. Now you and I skip the breaks driving the quickest way home, from Brockville to Toronto, down strange green roads, poplar seeds like snow, cold air streaming through the open windows. It's late spring. Nothing changes, only complicates. The same coordinates, different cities. Driving from Brockville to Toronto, light from past stars haunts the road. My window was down, people were screaming. The same poplars, different seeds, fall through different windows. In the aerial photograph, shadows of still bare trees cover the road. Repetition is the quickest way to destroy words. On these strange roads, you, the sun in my eyes, tell me quick before the language falls. Thank you so much.
So do you want me to introduce Valerie now, or?
Yeah, go ahead, Richard. It's your turn.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. I unmuted. Is that what I was supposed to do? Okay. I first encountered Val Nieman's poetry when I was judging for a North Carolina Writing Fellowship. The first thing that caught my mind was what she planned to use the funds for if she won. And that was not to attend workshops and seminars at universities, but to drive around the rural South, going to carnivals, tent shows, and sideshows. Sounded good to me. And she did get a grant. Later, when I read the book that came from this experience, Leopard Lady, I stopped halfway down the page and called my wife. Come here, you've got to see this. Something is happening. You can read all about her awards and publications on this site, I suppose. But for now, get ready to hear poems and prose that lifts you right out of Kansas. Get ready for strange stories and spooky music drifting from the swamps. The Valerie Nieman Carnival Tent Show of Marvelous Mysteries has come to town.
So, so many thanks. First to the Poetry Society of South Carolina for inviting me. I can't believe that you started with Carl Sandburg and Harriet Monroe, and I'm in that legacy. That's just, you know, amazing. And thank you to Isabel for wonderful poems. I enjoy Adroit, and I look forward to seeing your books as they blossom. So it was great to hear you tonight. And finally, thank you to Richard, who has become a good friend, and I look forward to seeing him, you know, perhaps later this year when we hear that Spoleto will be coming back and the Sundown series. So yay. So that is very humbling to have your good words about my poems. So thank you. I almost get nervous. I'm nervous on Zoom. This is ridiculous. Because I'm among friends, I know many of you, and it's so nice to see your faces and the little strip up there. But I'm going to read from Leopard Lady, and I'll also read some new poems toward the end. And I want to watch my time so I don't go over. I think I'm supposed to read until about 8 o'clock. Is that right? Or a little before? So I will try not to outstay my welcome. All right, so tomorrow I'm going to do a workshop on persona poems. And the reason I wanted to do that is because of this book, which arrived in a whirlwind. I was sitting on my porch, you know, noodling around in the journal, hoping something would happen as we do. And this voice started. And 13 pages later, I'm just writing as quickly as I can because it was just coming and coming and coming. And I had no idea where this voice came from. It was not anyone I knew or any life that I knew. I've never had any more acquaintance with a carnival than, you know, having some funnel cakes. But the voice came, and then others appeared as well. And so I felt, well, I sort of avoided it for a long time because of the strange nature of it. But then I did it. And as Richard said, I was honored to get a grant from the North Carolina Arts Council. And one thing I did was go to Coney Island and work up there and try to learn the lore of the carnival at one of the best places. And one of the things I did was paint. And so I painted the cover. It's folk art. It's not great. It's awkward, but that's what it was. It was just guys in the carny who just, you know, daubed these images of the performers. So I'm going to read from Leopard Lady, starting with that first poem that came almost intact that night. The Leopard Lady speaks. This leopard skin come onto me when I lost love. This is not for the marks to know. When my man's absence set a hot kindle of distrust that blowed back on me as lack of faith in what is more worthy than some handful of spit and dust. No wonder I lost my natural color, trying to be all things to him, and him not wanting what I ever was or become or any between. Turning away like a spoilt child, turning away like the sun eat up by the moon, and not my doing or undoing. I scourged my soul, turning myself inside out to make him a better tent against the weather of the world, stretching myself across his failings like a worn through quilt on a wide, cold bed. There weren't enough left to me then to fill a thimble, but I gathered myself back up and stood, feet reasonable to the earth, liver and light settling back like I'd been dropped from a high place. And I was about satisfied. But the letting go of that man, him of me, then me of him, left me streaked, specked, and spotted like the flocks of Jacob. And I opened my mouth to say out the true things that underprop the world. I hope it's okay that I'm not screen sharing. I just want to read, for the sound. So I think it's pretty easy to tell what's going on. The voice came intermittently, and it took a long time for me to figure out who this was. As I say, it wasn't anyone I knew, but gradually I could hear the Appalachian in her voice and the carnival. And we shared a couple of things, sort of that Appalachian roots. And I also suffer from what the Leopard Lady has, which is called vitiligo, where you lose color in your body. And so that was the connection between us, but that was a pretty tenuous one for everything that came after, because I got the whole story of this woman born in the 30s and her life up through about the 70s is where it ends in this book. So this is her talking about her life in Appalachia, born an orphan and given to a family to raise. No more haints. I heard an old woman so swear one afternoon when I was working at the McInerney's making sorghum. The Gastons would send me out for wages. Learning and earning, they said, and they leaned on the latter once I had grammar enough to read the good book and a body strong enough for chopping and toting. So come evening, we let off hauling cane and gave the mule his bucket. We was waiting supper when the grandma let slip that Hainch used to be about the place. A Yankee soldier who had his leg took off in the parlor, and a widow who walked and walked, their souls bound to the house, until the TVA set poles down the road and run a wire for the light. They are made of fine stuff, she said, and the crackle out of that electricity just poops them away. The men laughed, but I kept that speaking close to my heart, and I do believe it. The electric is made, I read in a magazine, by pushing and pulling on the world's innards. So in my wagon, I have no part of such working. I fill my oil lamps and trim them like I always done, and I hang my pot over a fire outside. No haints come to me, understand, not my mother, nor the dead along the ruckus of the highway, nor the souls sifting from whatever boneyard we've neighbored for our camp, nor water spirits from those drowned in rivers, nor ghostly mules that lead trapped men out of collapsed coal mines to light and air. The soul of all who breathe and those gone on before are equal made of this fine material. Like a spider thread hung with drops on a September dawn, it can be plucked and it will hum. So Dinah, who eventually gave me her name, but not for a long time. I tried to put names on her and none of them were right. And then one day it just, okay, Dinah arrived and told me who she was. Has a tough go. She's a biracial child, orphaned, given to a white family up in the mountains to raise, more or less as a servant. Eventually runs away and with a man who comes by and ends up being deserted at a carnival. And that's the start of a new life, because the carnival gives her a family for the first time of a sort. And she becomes deeply enmeshed in this world and works through different elements of this life, including being a psychic, being a dancer, and finally becoming what they would say in the sideshow, people would call freaks, who were actually sort of the royalty of the carnival because they had been given this marking by God, whatever it might be. So I wanted to read a piece that has some connection with South Carolina, because the carnival travels through the South for the most part. And so this is when they're in near Beaufort. And I'm sure I say that right, because up here they say Beaufort. Down here they say Beaufort. I'll try to get it right. A couple things that maybe need a little bit of explanation. You've heard of kangaroo court, but a kangaroo court in the carnival is actually where they really settle the problems. People say somebody stole something, somebody did something, and they would have the gathering of the members of the show, and they would make a decision on what kind of penalties that there would be for somebody violating the rules of the road. And then at the end of it, it was a night to pay fines, small fines, and then to celebrate. It was sort of a big day of the week. So in this case, the kangaroo court is hearing a case. The kangaroo court convenes. Lester swears he's dying because Ranny worked a root on him. Saw him myself at Beaufort, conjure man in purple tinted glasses. They call him Dr. Buzzard. The judge demands, did you put a curse on Lester? I don't know about no root. Her lazy tongue makes the words another curse. She put it up under my wagon, Lester said, little pouch like a carrot. I was scared of it, so I burned it. Lester has naught to show but his own body, eyes starting, flesh melting off in a way that does not inspire confidence in the guess your weight man. Ranny laughs. Burying nor burning won't end what is commenced in spite. The debate begins. How to lift a curse with nary root, nor worker, nor say-so of the one who bought it. Finally, I speak up. Holy water and prayer will kill the root. I get my Bible and that little vial Mrs. Elderia pressed last into my palm. The whole tribe trails me to Lester's wagon, where I sprinkle his doorstep and read out, as he loved cursing, so let it come unto him. As he delighted not in blessing, so let it be far from him. I dab my finger and draw on the door frame. As he clothed himself with cursing, like as with his garment, so let it come into his bowels like water and oil into his bones. That Ranny's a hard one. The Lord's words make no never mind to such. She spits on the ground. I finish off, O God the Lord, for thy name's sake, because thy mercy is good. Deliver thou Lester. The decision of the court is that Ranny forever leave the show. Already gone, she drawls. I got a Marine back there'll keep me in shoes. She switches her busy ass away to pack her flimsies. Lester looks like a poleaxe steer. The sergeant at arms rattles the box, relief fund fatter for our dimes and fines. Oil poured on water, the week's troubles settled. It's time for japes and foolishness till the stars stitch close our eyes. So Dinah unfolds her life. And she is a genuine psychic. She's also trained as one in how to do the tricks, but she actually has the gift. And she's also a close observer of the natural world and the people around her. So I'm going to read just one of those sort of observations. You don't leave it on the side of the road. Only the skunk, who is precious in the sight of the Almighty, for his first fingers marked its back like you'd stroke a cat's. That piss kitty just humping across the road, headed for what egg breaking or cricket hunting it does in the night. When the tire finds it and the wheel, the bump too small to be a body broken, but it was, raises up a smell from earth to heaven, like a mortal soul, clenched for the longest time to the ankle of its death. So do you want me to show these? Somebody talk to me. Do you want them up the way Isabel did?
You don't have to.
No? Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I'm doing as you wish. Another voice appeared that I wasn't expecting at all. Dinah continued to talk over several years. This took a long time before it was completed. And then another voice appeared, and this was the voice of the professor, who is a young man who joins the carnival, and he has his own reasons, his being that he's sort of a refugee from the seminary because of a crisis of faith. So this is Jonathan, the professor, who is going to become very close with Dinah in the course of the book. The calling. I thought I heard the voice of God when I was 8. A clear snap of something breaking, a twig or bone. And in that space that was left, my name. Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan. Episcopalians all on my mother's side, a glory of gold and lace and proper tales of vocation. Noah walked with God, I learned, and laggard Moses heard his name twice called. In Sunday school and seminary, I sought out the stories. I labored in the fields of Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek, as if new letters would invite that voice again. I did not ask for the earthquake, nor the fire, nor the great and mighty wind, only the still small voice to once more say my name. Instead, it was Malekapo, why are you here? What had I to do with God? I walked and waited, slept and sighed, dreamed for a dream, but the lamp of God had long ago gone out, and never again was my name called in the night. So Jonathan is also afflicted in a different way from Dinah. In his case, he was a blue baby, which you have to go back a ways. Babies were born with holes in their heart, and there was no way to fix them. They just died because the blood couldn't circulate, it circulated, and they would turn blue. And they didn't last long, depending on how severe this rerouting was. Doctors in Baltimore, a doctor, a nurse, and an assistant found a way to fix this. So they're heroes of medicine at Johns Hopkins who found out how to save the blue babies. And Jonathan was one of them. And this will continue to haunt him through the book. So this is him telling. The professor tells his scar. All of us wear scars, it's true. Some we show and some we keep beneath our clothes. It's only when the generator stops chugging power through Python cords and the lot goes dark at the edge of some town that I, button by button, open myself to the night, as surgeons once cut and spread my delicate ribs to find arteries tangled around my heart. Blue babies, they called us, but not for nursery blankets and boast of a boy. We were piped wrong. Our blood reversed its flow, got thick, and skin and lips turned blue for lack of air. I was 3 when my parents, despairing, carried my limp self into the hospital at Baltimore. Famous doctors undid what God had done, made the blood whoosh back into my lungs, and right away, they said, I flushed pink and lived. The scars so merged into my body now that it's no shame anymore. But as a child, it was a constant reminder. Born without a heart, the other kids would say, born without a heart. And they had to put one inside of me like Frankenstein. My parents labored to explain. Doctors sewed up a hole, put a patch on my frayed heart, stitched it all around like the sampler that hung above my grandmother's bed. How sweet are thy words to my taste, yea, sweeter than honey to my mouth. I asked her, what's a stitch? And she showed me on that sampler. Here, a feather stitch, satin and cross stitch, ladder, overcast, and star. I chose the cross stitch, deciding that must be the one. Small, silken crosses holding my poor, shivering heart together. So in the world of the carnival, the professor is also called the inside man. He's the guy that once the guy outside that we call the barker, but who was actually called the outside man, he would get everybody there. He'd call them in, come see these wonderful, strange creatures, these strange people. And he would get everybody there, and then they'd usher them into the tent once they'd gotten their money. And the inside man, or the professor, would then explain the stories, would spin stories about these people, how they came to be, half man, half woman, or a wolf boy, or, whatever that was going on. The thing about the carnival that I learned as I was going around and reading and talking to people is that we look at it now and we think kind of, well, that's really horrible. You're putting people on display and you're taking their infirmities and you're using it to make money, and this is horrible. And we do, today we would think that is in fact the case. But for much of the carnival history in the 18th, 19th, early 20th century, people who exhibited themselves often became quite well-to-do. And in North Carolina, we have the Siamese twins, the original Siamese twins, Chang and Eng, became quite wealthy, came to North Carolina, bought adjoining farms and married sisters, and had a long life and many descendants. They took the American name Bunker, and so there are Bunkers all over that are descendants of these brothers who died within hours of each other. When one dies, the other one dies when they're together. But it was a way that these people were not just put in an institution or locked in the attic. They had lives and income and relationships. So it was a strange thing thinking about this whole issue of infirmities and disabilities and how they were treated. And certainly we wouldn't do this today, but in its day, it had a little bit of a different role. The Leopard Lady tells her spots. Don't be looking for what's daubed on that banner. The Leopard Lady naked in the jungle, brown skin all over with black spots like wallpaper on a wall. I'm more so like a spotted hound, or the rump of the Appaloosie our trick rider uses, white strode over dark. But truly, like the banner says, I am alive. Inside the tent, I rest on a high stool, wrapped in red, till the professor brings them round and spiels a story that ain't mine. I keep my back to the crowd, but they spy my hands, spotted like trout fish, resting on my shoulders. I hear them rustle and breathe. Then I let the silk slide down. Nothing there, one says out. My back is perfect brown, except for a patch on my backbone just above the spangly girdle I wear for modesty, but it's scarce that. The silk be whispering louder than them as the kimono falls, and I turn and stand. They see me top to toe, all over speckled, face to breast to ankles, my affliction being such that where one side is marked, so will be the other. Here I am. Then the light dims down, and the crowd shuffles along to see the terrible snake man of the Amazon, and I gather up my red to cover my nakedness. I'm going to read one last and then do a few new poems. I won't tell you what happens with Dinah and the professor. I hope you might want to read the rest of their story, of which these are little excerpts. But this is from late in the book when their lives are tested by illness, as they are often. The professor tells about the wheel. Some say it's a wheel, he tells me, this life we know. The soul sent back again and again, man become cat, monkey, a pine tree, mayhap a beetle creeping or a prince on a blood horse. And no getting off till you learn all that's needful on this earth. I ponder wheels, wagons and trucks and trains rolling me hither and yon, triple rings under the big top, the great wheel, carousel, round up, tilt-a-whirl. The wall of death, seems we all circle and circle. But this Buddha said you could fly free to a heaven place, not as we believe, those folks lacking Jesus, but close by Jehovah's throne. I know my soul is sealed and glory bound, but I would surely like off this earthly wheel of sadness. Attachment is the cause of pain, he says. And I hold his spotted hand with mine and say, yes, it is the wanting that makes the hurt, and not the having or even the losing. So that's Dinah and the professor's story, or little pieces of it. And once the final poem came, which is set at Coney Island, that was it. I've never heard from these voices again. And this is the only time I've had this kind of experience with a poem. I've had, others that we work, you come up with ideas, but nothing quite like that. So thank you for indulging in my reading of that. And so I'm going to read some new stuff now, a little bit different in vein. I've just bought an old house. I don't know if any of you are fans of old houses, but I like old creaky houses with character. Of course, Charleston has them in great abundance. But this house is more than 100 years old. And even though it's a brick house, they picked it up and moved it from one street to another, which seems to me very odd. And so I've been writing poems about this house. And so I'm going to read a couple of those. Settled as it seems. If I wanted something older, something settled, then this 100-year-old house is not that kind of refuge, because it hovers. It's all windows and doors with windows. You can see clean through from the porch, frame after frame, to the second backyard, the one behind the screen of firethorn. The house is buoyant, balanced, an airship freighted with quarter-sawn oak and granite, the weight of hundreds of trees pressed into a forest of books. I cannot account for this light-footedness until I learn it was not made here, board hammered to board, but was jostled up South Main and down South Park to be let down with its bricks disheveled. I'm adding concrete to the foundation, stuffing rocks in its pockets, tethering the roof like a circus tent to the ground, lest the house some stormy night when the wind gives its voice, should lift up its seven-gabled crown and shift us elsewhere. So it's fun being in this house. It has a good feeling. Whatever ghosts are here are happy ghosts. There's nothing unsettling in this place. And this is another poem in that sequence. Home. I don't know how long it will last. This sagging board fence that I propped with rebar and screwed to posts loose in their sockets. I should have ripped the whole thing out, but couldn't obliterate a village of lichen that might live for decades yet. Myself, I'm borrowing against time I do not own, putting muscle and bone into the retirement cottage, hoping that like a clock with an exceedingly intricate movement, the house will unwind, tick by slow talk, until long after me, it is again as I found it, peeling and out of square, shabby as an ancient apple tree, nearly merged with the ground. And this poem comes from another unlikely place. It is based on a real incident, so as strange as it seems. And it's for Gerald Stern. He has his wonderful poem, Behaving Like a Jew, where he talks about finding the body of the animal in the ditch and giving it his attention. So this is called Becoming Ariel for Gerald Stern. Groundhog in a tree, behaving like a bird, like a squirrel, nibbling tender green buds at branch end, high wiring above a bog. Any burrow dug here would be swamped from front door to back stoop. How did he come to cross water and ascend? Diggers curve deep in the bark as a lineman spikes. A crow would think twice about lighting on a branch so frail. Soil shoveling wedge of a face, a fat tail that never could balance his loose bulk. This creature was not meant for such heights. His round belly wad destined to bloat in a ditch beside the road. Still, he sways against the sky, close to the sun, Caliban joyously drunk on spring sap drawn up from the mud and darkness he was born to. Tiny feet dancing and dancing. And you can look that up on Google if you want. They do this. It was like an angel. I mean, what is it doing up there? What an amazing moment. This is another nature poem and spring poem, kind of in tune with the season, called Intercession. Save one life and starve another. Move the worm crawling the asphalt on a foggy spring morning, or leave it to its bird beak fate. Move the worm from the asphalt, jab a stick in the spokes of the world. The beak stays empty, the fate of chicks. Helpfulness may not end well. Jab a stick in the spokes of the world, cradle a blackbird with a broken wing. What ends well? All's not well for the mouse in the pussycat's teeth. That blackbird with a broken wing died miserably in a hot, dark box. The mouse, snatched from the cat's teeth, turned to bite the protecting hand. What died slowly in a hot, dark box? A marriage, a man hollow at the core, turned to savage my soft hand. Leave one life to save another. In Leopard Lady, I mentioned that one poem was based at Beaufort, and in fact is based on a real person. Dr. Buzzard was a real person, a conjure man. And I have friends who live there, and I came onto that story when visiting with them. So this is also set in South Carolina. Low Country Advent. A gaunt white man in a feed store cap leans forward and peers deep into the plastic eyes of the tallest and darkest of the Magi. 3 signs tilt at the side of the road. Flat Earth. The moon landing was fake. Jesus has already come. 10 miles back on this 2-lane, a black man with a prophet's blazing beard is walking hard against the wind, headed east. At the Yemassee station, riders advance like sandpipers to the platform's edge, retreat when no train appears at the vanishing point. Cars on the route home from Thanksgiving slaughter slow beasts. Buzzards arrive, hopping and flapping toward the providence they have been assured. And I'm going to give you one more house poem and finish up with a small piece. And then we can talk, which is always the best part. Sin number 10. For Al. This morning, I'm startled by shards of light swinging across the floor of this home that's barely mine. Reflections off agate wind chimes bought at the start of an earlier new life. This recurrent picking up and breaking and gathered goods to be sorted, left, or stashed. You stored my tools during the move, along with ancestral pots and these slices of stone, which, also loving wind chimes, you hung in your own garden. Housed once more as leaves and heedful birds flew, I longed for that sweet random clashing, the music of rock falls and talus trembling at gravity's urge. I coveted the things, I admit. But how can you covet your own? Finally, abashed, I asked for their return. Yesterday you arrived and hung them from a fern hook on my front porch. I took the wind from your trees, friend. I stole the notes right out of your ears. And finally, this little poem. Our hands were once webbed. Like ribs of a broken umbrella, fingers are just bone dressed with a bite of flesh. Cold in their independence until hand finds hand. Those negative spaces filled, the always wanting comforted. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be thinking about Dinah and the professor and the Barkers and everyone else. Can you tell us, maybe talk to us a little bit about your workshop tomorrow morning? And I want to tell everyone that if you did register, you will be getting a confirmation of that before 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if it's worrying you that you haven't received that so far, that's when you're going to get it. So, so Val, tell us about your workshop.
Well, I'm going to spin off of some of the Leopard Lady work and talk about writing in someone else's being, in persona. Of course, there are, I'm going to go through some examples, dramatic monologues, etc., and talk about what kind of it feels like to inhabit someone else and how uncomfortable that can be, that, you know, especially when you didn't look for it. I was inspired a long time ago, I think, by Frank X. Walker's stories, I call them stories because it's a narrative of the man who accompanied Lewis and Clark to the West Coast and back, a slave who rescued the Lewis and Clark expedition over and over and over again, and was trusted, worked and lived beside them, came back to Virginia and was immediately put back into servitude. I mean, horrible story. I saw that they're putting up a bust of him somewhere, and I've lost his name. Problem of old age, but anyway, Frank X. Walker's book is magnificent, and I remember hearing him read it, and I think that had always stayed in my mind, and maybe that's why when these voices came, I wanted to do a long narrative, because I really admired what he did with that. And so we're going to talk about, you know, how you can inhabit another person, some approaches, and do a prompt. So I hope that we'll enjoy kind of talking about the tradition of in this area and some ways of handling it, and then share some work, do some quick poem. If people feel like they'd like to share, they can. If they feel like not, that's fine too. I know how those workshops are. Sometimes there's just nothing. You know, you try really hard, but sometimes you get these wonderful poems. So I'm hoping that some wonderful poems at least get started in the workshop tomorrow. So I look forward to working with all the folks who come. Great.
Thanks. That does sound very interesting. And anyone who hasn't registered yet, you go to our website, poetrysocietysc.org, and click on the. It's real easy. It just says register, and then apparently nothing will happen until tomorrow morning, in which time you'll get the link and you'll be able to join. So Val, is there, if for people want to buy Leopard Lady, is there a preferred, it's preferred by you method to buy it, that you make the most money, or do you just go on Amazon, or how would they do that?
Well, I really urge people to use Bookshop. If your local bookstore, you could certainly go to your local bookstore, which I think is the best thing, and ask them to order it. But Bookshop online gives you the opportunity to support a local independent bookstore by ordering that way, rather than the big A, which, you know, Amazon sells our books and we're very happy with that, but we really want to keep the literary community alive in the way that local bookstores do. I mean, I'm blessed to have two great bookstores in the area, Scuppernong in Greensboro and Bookmarks in Winston-Salem. And they both put on great literary festivals. So maybe, I know that Greensboro Bound is going to be online this year. I don't know about Bookmarks, but I hope maybe in future years you might come. They're great events and free. So that's nice too.
Super. John has put the survey link up on the chat there, which you should see on the right, and it's getting buried now. Okay. Oh, he just put a link that Buxton Books has copies.
I see that.
That's cool. You can, that'd be a great, easy way for you to do it here in Charleston, at least. And he's putting the survey back up again, so it doesn't get buried, because we really need you to do this. This is part of our funding, and I know it sucks. Nobody wants to take a survey. In the history of, if we took a survey for people, did you ever want to take a survey? First of all, no one would take it, and second of all, they would all say no, they didn't want to take it. So, but please do take 2 minutes out of your time. And thank you, Val, for that wonderful reading. And thank you, Isabel, for your opening. I wonder that's Prioleau is an old Charleston name. Are you related to your people from Charleston, or yes?
Yeah, they were French Huguenots.
Yeah. We had several in the early Poetry Society. We had several Prioleaus were members in the 1920s. I don't know if you are related to any of them. Maybe you are. And we have lots of ghosts here tonight. Maybe your ancestors who were members of the Poetry Society and Harriet Monroe, who, if we woke her up with by quoting her tonight, then maybe she enjoyed this reading as well. So any questions? We got a few minutes for questions if anyone has questions for Val or Isabel. And if not, then we will conclude the March meeting.
Can I ask Isabel a question?
Sure.
I love the little notes which you provided where these things came from. How do you generate the poems? Do you just see what comes in the news feed on a day and just react to that? Or are you shaping certain things and then you go in search of articles that might feed into that?
That's a really excellent question. For me, I kind of like, it's not that I don't really sit down to like write a poem from start to finish. I more like I think I hear things and I overhear things, just like when I'm out and about, hearing other people talking on the street. I see things on the news, and I think like over the course of a week, that'll all just kind of like accumulate, and I'll make note of it. And then when it comes time to put it together, I kind of start looking for like the connections between those things and try to like build the rest of the poem around the connection, like between the news story and the thing I heard the woman at the cafe say.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful to see how these things fit together. And it's almost like, it made me think of like sliding doors, because, you know, you'd see this and then something would slide in behind and then it'd come back. And so you had like these layers that were sliding back and forth. And I thought it was just fascinating that these leaps that were coming between these lines. And so really, really like them.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. I started talking without being unmuted. Thank you, everybody. If we don't I don't see any other questions in the chat. It was a marvelous evening, and I'm so glad that we got you down here after a year of from being postponed last year. And I think we're all very much looking forward to getting COVID in our rear view mirror and looking towards the day that we can see each other in person, because I do miss the society aspect of the Poetry Society, and seeing all of you is only a small compensation of that, but look forward to the days when we can meet again. And if you are not in the area, you'll be able to see us meeting, I guess, by way of Zoom. And anyway, thank you for coming, and thank you to our two poets. Thanks, Richard and Gary, for doing the introductions, and thanks to our team who keeps us this Zoom thing going pretty smoothly. John and Charles, really appreciate it. And I am going to stop the recording, and then we can all talk freely.